people that are attracted to the work that you do, the work that we do, they are the graduate students in the one-room schoolhouse Earth. And so we want to give them graduate caliber materials, graduate caliber information. And that's what we will produce. And that's actually why you're stimulated and inspired by the possibilities of what we can do together. We are stimulated and inspired by the possibilities of what we can do together.
I agree with you. That's the intention here, is to bring full court press, if you want to use that term, the best of the best between us, to help people that are watching this to go, wow, this is different, it's deep, and it's meaningful, and it's something they've maybe heard before, but they hear very differently.
Yeah, because in today's environment, just speaking louder isn't enough. You have to have a new vocabulary. We're building a new vocabulary because the old vocabulary is what got us to where we are. And we need to be able to excavate ourselves out of this. So the new vocabulary is what we are developing, and it's going to pay dividends to not confront what's happening in the world, but to outflank it.
Okay. I like outflank.
Yeah.
Why do you say outflank?
Because I look at what's happening in the world as having the dynamics of meteorology. And I don't know if you know the very, very, very inexact science of weather, meteorology. It is at a really macro level. Meteorology is somewhat predictable. At a micro level, meteorology is completely unpredictable. And that's why they say such ridiculous things as 20% chance of rain. What is 20% rain? If it's raining, and that's 100%. If it's not, and that's zero. So a 20% chance of rain is people basically saying we have no idea. But what we do have is we see the inclinations. We see the atmospheric inclinations. But it's like a topography map in which the mountains are liquid. And so what looked like a valley from the map has now changed since the map was drawn. And now it's no longer a valley, it's a hill. And so the waves in meteorology, the waves of the atmosphere, are very much like the waves of human interrelation. And so when I say a new vocabulary to outflank, what I'm saying is that we need to be able to look from such a high level. And when I say outflank, I'm not talking about in this direction, I'm talking mainly in this direction. We have to outflank to embrace, and then we have to outflank in the altitude in order to be able to understand. And think about it in terms of marketing even, because that's what we're here talking about. If you can get close enough to the source of where all life left its one source, that source of oneness, at tangential angles, and has traveled now for billions of years, and those slightly tangential angles have now created a massive amount of space in between, because as they extend out, they separate more deeply. But if you can outflank to the extent where you can get back to source code, you can get back to life's source code, which is where I go in meditation. It's why people are taking all of these plant medicines now, with the ayahuasca and such, is because that's kind of like, let's go to a movie of life rather than let's go and actually engage the depth of life. So it's good to go to a movie of life on an occasion. I've never done it, but because I've always been, since birth, I've been a meditator. My family was a yogic family. But you get down to that source code, and that's when you start to recognize, okay, what are common words? What are common phrases? What are things that I don't have to convince you of, but that the moment I express it, you have an aha. And that's the kind of marketing that you and I are going to be, in part. You'll have a lot to add to that. Just as an initial salvo, that's the kind of marketing that is what we are here to offer, is the way of the way is in the Tao, that you're not actually trying to find out anything. You are you're at the source code, and you can see where everything comes together. So as you build from that, everybody recognizes what it is that you're up to.
Beautiful. And when you say source code, I mean, my company's called Groundswell Origins. I totally agree to the idea of when you get down to the bare bones of things, when you can really bring it down and get to, like, I love the word source to things, and using your topography map as an example, that's kind of how I view the landscape of marketing for business people today. It's always moving. If you understand the source and you understand the laws of nature, or we'll call it the laws of marketing, if that's even a law, just saying those fundamentals, you can move and adapt to it and move away from what I believe is old thinking. I'm sorry for people that do funnels, but like funnels and things of that nature that are more template based, because it's for them, it's a shortcut they're thinking that they're doing, instead of embodying the idea of just moving and being real and authentic to themselves. I think that's the kind of marketing that we're trying to communicate, where people actually don't feel that icky feeling. That icky feeling, I think, is an actual feeling it's going against who I really am, or something of that nature.
What do you mean at a deeper level? Because at some point, like, you have to have a landing page to get your heart and soul out onto it to sell. So what is your perspective, and what do you mean by that? Like, what's icky about a funnel?
Yeah, okay, it's a really good question, because I think it embodies what I believe is a different way of thinking. I think of it like this. Marketing is like a car, and a car has to have fundamentals, meaning there's four wheels, it's got to have a steering wheel, it's got to have an engine. Those are the pieces of any marketing that you need to have that's car. But you can create the car any way you want. It's a vehicle, right? Like, you can design it any way you want. It can be a fast car, long car. Those are marketing programs. When you look at a funnel, when people just basically take one that's off the lot, if you will, and they just follow it, what happens is, first and foremost, people do it because it works. But because something works doesn't mean you should. And what I mean by that is, if I, for example, a funnel by its natural design was reverse engineered from a way that you look at the analytics of your response rates, attention, so awareness, consideration, comparison, and then commitment, and then subscribers, and so on. Those are actually, that was an original design, was a whiteboard, how you explain to somebody where our marketing is working and bringing it down to a sale. Well, what they did was they reverse engineered that as a way of corralling people, in terms of narrowing their process, so that as a human, you're boxing them in, so that leaves them no room to go, this is the obvious choice. In some ways that works until it doesn't. And here's what I mean. If you've been in a funnel the first couple of times, you're like, yeah, this worked. But then in the future, what happens is, as humans, we go, wait a minute, something's happening. I've seen this before. This feels the same. And then what shifts for you is your flight or fight response. What happens in our bodies, which I think is really negatively affecting so many people. You go, am I being tricked? So you have your defense mechanisms up. And if you're a yoga studio that's trying to create openness and you're doing this, technically you're actually not in congruency with what you're teaching. You can use those structures like a frame and just change it a bit, so that it becomes more congruent with you. The funneling is one of the ones I have the least excitement about, because I feel like it has this sense that you have formularically figured out humans and you follow this linear process.
Yeah.
And when you're in a funnel, you know it. Have you ever noticed that when you're in a funnel, you go, oh, I'm in a funnel?
Yeah, I already am.
Kind of wrecks marketing. I think mindful marketing is about intrigue. It's about drawing you in. It's about being like, it's like smelling on the street. You smell the beautiful aroma of a restaurant. You're like, where is it? That's what I think mindful marketing is.
Cool.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think that has room to go deeper, as everybody's looking to build community. And so maybe have fun exploring how you can do that. But I gotta go.
Billy, that's a great question. That's amazing, because that's what that often I bring that up.
The word sorcerer has gotten degraded.
Negative connotation. Yeah.
But what it means is a source seer. A sorcerer is a source seer. Alchemist, also degraded. What an alchemist is one who can combine all avenues in order to find the gold, because the combination of all of the spectrum of visible light turns into what is golden sunlight. And so the only way that they could prosecute what they called were heretics, alchemists, that they were considered heretics because they were actually living in the world that, according to the church, only Jesus had the right to live in, right? That world of total and absolute knowing. And so the combination of sorcerers and alchemists, these were two arms of the same body. And both of those words, along with other words, many, many words in many languages, were degraded so that they would be considered to be absolute taboos, because they didn't want anyone competing with the hierarchy that they had set up, which was Jesus at the top, the priests and various orders and popes and cardinals and bishops, etc., etc. And they had this hierarchical setup, and they didn't want anybody being able to say, oh, I have found that this is true. And so being able to create a new language while using, I'm not talking about just inventing all words, but while using a lot of the language that has been degraded in the past, is something, Tony does it, neurolinguistic NLP, neurolinguistic programming does it. There are many avenues, and Tony and I both studied NLP many years ago. And that is also the value of mantric language. And that was way back in the days of old, is that mantric language was again, the invention of a new language, because the time that we're going through is no different than any other time of crisis in history. And so we are those source seers. We are the seers of the source. We are those alchemists that are able to combine. And isn't that what marketing is? You combine the supply with the need.
Yeah, and for sure. And I think I'm a marketing heretic, or at least I thought I was. And
You are.
until our episode kind of went out, and I couldn't believe in my community how well received it was.
Perfect.
I'm really happy to hear that. I mean, that's what we got this together of us doing this, was the overwhelming response. And I think there's an appetite for it. So here we are.
There you go.
So here we are. That's kind of like, that was the preamble. So anyone that's watching, who knows how we're going to edit this? I like the idea of not editing it, like not chopping it. I like the idea of it being free flow. And I think that's where you and I were landing, going, look, let's describe this as masterful class, a new form of class, of way of communicating and teaching, where we go two people talking through, and maybe in real time even inventing or real imagining what could be for business. And instead of just going in and having these discussions in a room and then creating an outline and making this great process, going, let's just do it and we'll share it and people can experience it. I think this is really interesting in that way.
Yes, absolutely interesting. The first thing that comes to mind when I think of mindful marketing is not that we're filling up the mind, but that we're recognizing that the mind is full. And I don't mean full like of chatter. I mean everything in the human instrument is connected to everything in the universe. You just have to learn how to use the connecting components to benefit from that connection. It's like Wi-Fi access, right? You can have the cheapest little laptop, but if you've got a good Wi-Fi connection, that cheap little laptop can be brilliant because it can go anywhere in the World Wide Web and access any database and any information that is brilliant, that's been put there by PhDs and Nobel Prize winning people, Pulitzer Prize winning people, right? And so mindful marketing is, in my sense of it, and I'm approaching it from the side that I'm about to describe, to me is, how do we get people who want to market that which they know people are going to appreciate if they know it exists? How can we get them to realize their fullness of the mind, right? How can we get marketers to realize how they can how they can realize that the mind is full? And then how can they realize and allow the audience, the customer, the interested parties, the searching parties, how can they appropriate that connection, which is completely different than what you were just describing a moment ago of, and I loved your expression, when you're in a funnel, you know it. But that comes from experience. A lot of people will never know they're in a funnel, right? Because they're not going to use that degree of awareness. But definitely when you're in a funnel and you know it, even if you want the product, you lose interest. You just said fight or flight a moment ago. You know, that's the kind of the base reaction. Well, that's the reaction of what's called the sympathetic nervous system, right? The central nervous system is divided into parasympathetic and sympathetic. And the parasympathetic is the meditative, the higher view, the broader perspective, the more consuming kind of awareness, where it consumes the information and then draws a conclusion. The sympathetic nervous system is the one that jumps to a conclusion and then does everything it can to get out of there. When you, and you were saying, no matter who you are, when you feel like you're in a funnel, you feel a little trapped. And that biological sensation of being, that psychobiological sensation of being trapped, automatically ignites the sympathetic nervous system to get out of the funnel.
It's like the social networks are under fire because they're playing with the human nervous system of conditioning. Yep. With these alerts and so forth. And this mindful marketing movement, I believe, that we're creating is straight up against that. It's doing the opposite and allowing people to feel naturally. And I think that the pitfall that a lot of people have about this sort of thinking is they think it's weak, or they think it's ineffective, or they think it might be slow. And I would argue with the work that I'm doing with my book Groundswell is I'm demonstrating, and a lot of times it can happen very rapidly, but the reality is it can work phenomenally. We've been fed this short-term junk food thinking around marketing, and that you have to get people's attention and they turn and do these alerts and yelling. You said at the very beginning, yelling and doing more, that somehow that is going to get more attention, thereby which is going to produce a result. I believe a tipping point, we're at the verge of it, where people, it's no longer working and they're just going louder. And what's going to happen is there's going to be a tipping point. We have to do something different. We're discussing what is new different.
This is great because you used a word a little bit, or you were attracted to a word a little bit ago when I said outflank. And, you know, there's a whole new study in psychology at the university level called phenomenology. Okay. What is the science of a phenomenon? And one of the things that they have found is that the way you create a phenomenon is you prepare more than you direct. And that preparation is like what creates the groundswell, to use your word. A groundswell is a phenomenon. Mm-hmm. It seems to appear out of nowhere. You know, I always think about the Bible and the Old Testament and the story of the skies were blackened with locusts as they came down and devoured the crops of Egypt, right? And I wasn't so impressed by the skies blackening or devouring of the crops. I wanted to know, where in the hell were they reproducing? Because if you get a cloud of locust, they had to be reproducing somewhere.
Hmm.
That's phenomenology. Phenomenology, that's groundswell. What we're dealing with here is, how do you arrive at the same intersection as your customer by knowing their route, by knowing their inclinations and their inferences, as I was talking about meteorology earlier. It's like meteorology. It's not, and you used the word law, and then you kind of question as to whether it was a law. No, it is a law, because law comes from the same root as the word logic. There, at a certain level, there is logic to even the most random of events at a certain level, whether it's a level that's out and above or it's a level that's deep embedded inside. And so being able to scan that full spectrum, from looking at it from the 200,000 mile level, or being inside of it at the subatomic particulate level, at some place in that spectrum, you run into the law, which is light travels at this at this
Law of
speed.
gravity. You can
Yeah.
fight it all you want,
The
but it's
law,
still the law.
exactly. It is the law. And so these are the components that we can catch in mindful marketing, because we will be opening up with new language so that we don't draw old conclusions to meet new circumstances.
Beautiful.
And you were talking about the old conclusion of a funnel. The funnel worked until it didn't work, right? The steamboat worked until it didn't work. Gas engine car worked until it didn't work, until we had too many gas engine cars on the road. We've reached that tipping point now. The horse worked until it didn't work, and it got replaced by the gas engine car. Yeah.
But do you know what always works? Great reputation, value, things that are timeless like that. And that's what we're talking about, is going back to the root of how business can be done. And I find a lot of times that some of the best artisans, the best people in the world, they're not great marketers, and they succeed. And some of them are wildly successful without any level of marketing, which is totally commendable. But there's far too many people that are great marketers, but have subpar products, or maybe even ethical products, because their marketing is there, they're succeeding. And I feel like the people that are trying to do right by the world and make an impact in the world, they feel like this overwhelming force that you have to be that, or that is the world that we live in. And I say it's changing. And what we're talking about outflanking is going, this is the new, I think, strategic advantage. I should be excited about it, not like, hey, this is patient and slow. When I think mindful marketing, I also think of the bowstring, pulling it back. And being mindful means you're just taking a little time to create tension, thinking, and planning, and being a little mindful. And that's why when I first was coming up with this, my pillars, it used to be get, grow, keep. How do you get customers, grow customers, and keep customers? And I'm like, wait a minute, something's missing here. We need to be more mindful. There needs to be build. And then instead of go get customers, we need to give. What are we giving? Grow can stay grow, but lastly, how do we transform and change people's lives? Not how do we keep them? They're not trapped. We're not trying to like imprison people. It's how we're trying to unleash people. And that's really what I think the future of mindful marketing is. It's really there for people looking to make a difference in the world. I don't know that what we're talking about serves people that are just trying to move commodities, but maybe it does. I don't know what your thoughts are.
My thoughts remind me of a comparison. Do you remember when you were 4 feet tall?
Yeah.
What was your effort to grow from 4 feet tall to 5 feet tall? What was your effort?
When I think about it, I wanted to be bigger, right? Because I'm little, but I had no effort. I just basically, I don't think I did anything. Is that what you mean?
Yep. Basically, what you did was you kept the value in your body. And the value in our bodies is our health. right? And so that's how we grew because if we didn't maintain our health, we would have died before we got to 5 feet tall. And so what is the health of an enterprise? The health of an enterprise is the values and the missions and the purpose. These are the things that are of great value. In the ancient teachings of the Siddhis, which were a precursor to the Vedas and the Vedas, the Ayurvedic, and in Chinese medicine, it talks about how the autoimmune system will protect that which you have valued. Now you can value it on an intellectual level, you can value it on an emotional level, and you can value it on a physical level. But in order to really engage the immune system, the autoimmune system, you have to value it on all of those levels. And so if you are a highly valuable person and you're physically, you know you're valuable, your physiology knows you're valuable, your emotions know you're valuable, your mental processes know you're valuable, your spirit knows you're valuable, then you're going to be able to live in a healthy state more likely than one who is not paying attention to those things. And so if you make yourself that great, you were talking just a moment ago about the great artisans of the world. Well, what creates a great artisan? What creates a great artist? It's that they have a passion for making a most magnificent whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. You know what's interesting what you're saying?
The value.
Loving this. Because what we're talking about is, before we talk about marketing, it's like, what does it mean to be a mindful marketer? It starts with your personal brand. Starts with you valuing you. How many people, if they put offers out there, but they go, I hope someone buys it, they actually don't truly value themselves. They don't actually have that really deep understanding that you are valuable. Either they have self-doubt or they haven't done the work. That's usually, I'll be honest with you, I think that's a lot of times, is if people actually did the work and tried to make their product differentiated, or their offering, or they did the work that they needed to do, whatever it is in the business, then they would feel more inclined to probably share.
Dang. The exact word that I was thinking in the moment that you said it. Inclined. That was so beautiful. It was like you jumped in my mouth.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah.
so what do we think about inclined? Like inclination,
Well,
yeah.
When you have, this is exactly what my thought was.
Okay.
When you have super high self-valuation, super high self-respect, super high self-realization, all of which is just a bundle of glory, right? Around the self. You are inclined to make everything around you really good. You can cook a meal for friends. It's really wonderful. I mean, it may not be the most elegant meal in the world, but because it's produced with such love and passion, everybody is just engaged in it. You can play an instrument if you are a musician, and people love to listen to you. You may not have the great, Louis Armstrong is a perfect example. He could play the trumpet, so people, when he sang, because he had the worst singing voices that ever made a record, they loved listening to Louis sing, because Louis had no doubt that he was great. And he sings like this. He had a trumpet player's voice, because blowing a trumpet blows out, it has a lot of backdraft, and it blows out your vocal cords from all the pressure. But he was so enchanted by his musicianship that everybody became enchanted by it. And so that is what I was going to say, inclined, is that when you are in love, in awareness, in realization, in respect of yourself, then you are creating a groundswell, and you are inclined on that groundswell, just like if you were surfing, boards in the background, good prop, just as you're surfing the swell of the wave. I mean, look at the perfect wave, you know, the one that you can ride for miles and it just remains glassy smooth because the depth of the ocean floor is not changing and the wave is in motion. And by the way, remember, and of course you know this better than anyone, when you're riding a wave, the water is not moving with you. The water is just rising up and down. The water doesn't actually move forward until it casts onto the beach, till the wave breaks apart. And so we lift people, the groundswell lifts people up. The groundswell doesn't move forward. It's not a forward motion, but it's the swell of that ocean that you ride.
And you're just gravity, and you're just like the power of it. We're talking about like the self. I call it the epic center or the epicenter. So it's like kind of a play on words.
Epic center is a play on words. Scott, you just nailed it. That's exactly what I'm talking about. When you made up that word, and every word in the world, in every language, was made up at some time by someone. So feel free, right? So you made up a word, epic center. You said, I call it the epic center. Everybody that would be listening to you would hear epicenter, and it would make sense to them, and then they would catch themselves just 2 or 3 seconds later go, whoa, that's a new, whoa. Because now they're open, because they recognize epicenter, and then they realize you just said epic.
That's my intertwining of the groundswell and the connection of personal brand. You're the founder owner. The most powerful brands, I believe, the founder owner really embodied what you were talking about mindfully and understands their worth and has clear congruency of their values. That's like this, the epicenter of a storm is like a focused storm that's powerful. I called it the epic center because I like the word epic anyways, but it kind of happened to be a great play on words, but it's like epic also means expansive. And so when you have this epic center, you're going to have an epic outcome. Those are the 2 words I'm using, because you can, as a company, people can do these things and try to embody this. But if there's a leader, and then if you can have the leader permeate where you have a whole team or a business that's all creating this epic center of the same congruency. And I have a little chart I could show and share with people that, to me, that's what creates this storm. It creates this like powerful sort of impact, but it starts with the core.
Yeah.
I've just seen so many great marketing ideas and things happen, and it was given to them, meaning so say, for example, if they came to me and I said, no, you're saying I'm going to help you through marketing, and you go, hey, could you come up with something? And I go create it and I go, here it is. And you go, oh, this is amazing. It's a little different when you're part of the process and I'm facilitating and understanding what you're like, the value and congruency. And then I come and I go, I know the laws of marketing. I'm going to apply those to what you're saying. That's what I believe is different about groundswelling and about the work that I want to do. And what mindful marketing in my mind is that people are trying to copy instead of being themselves and just try to apply the laws of the universe. And that's where I think this 2 worlds come together, is if we can help them understand just the basic laws and we help them really feel confident about what their powers are, how they can get source, how they can really create their own way in a way that people have never seen and experienced, that actually has a lot of power. And just because it hasn't done before doesn't mean it's not possible to do even better than what's already out there. I think that I would argue that there's so many meals that are handmade that are far better than most of the junk food. That's what I think marketing has become junk food. I hate to say it that way, but that's how I feel about it.
And what the unimaginative junk food, because copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. I don't know if you remember back in the day before digital, but you know, eventually somebody would lose the master and then they'd use a copy to make a bunch of copies, right? And then it degraded over time because the analog version degrades, right? Mm-hmm. It's just if you record something on tape and then you duplicate that tape, there's a degradation that takes place. And what we're talking about here is we're talking about going to source code so that you're at the original symphony playing. You're not listening to a recording. You're actually listening to the symphony actually playing. And in that regard, what we're looking at here is to get people down inside of their own symphony, down inside of their own orchestra, the orchestra of their ideas, the orchestra of their desires, the orchestra of their needs, their family, etc., etc. And every orchestra has different sections. And what we have here in mindful marketing is we have a training ground so that people can get into the center, the epic center of that orchestra and begin to tune the harmonies rather than get some blueprint of how it should be done and then trying to fit, their orchestra into that box, funnel, whatever we want to call it. And what will end up happening is that people will have a self-realized experience. They'll think they're going through a marketing course, and they're actually going through a course in self-realization.
Totally. My clients tell me, they go, I was coming to get branding and I feel like I went on a spiritual journey. And I'm like,
that's why you and I have been drawn together, because even though we don't look alike, we're exactly alike.
Mm-hmm. I know. I feel like we're reading each other's minds a little bit.
Just for if anybody is viewing this, that also comes from the fact that Scott and I have been talking about how he's lined up with surfboards behind him and I'm lined up with guitars behind me. It's basically the same thing. We're both riding waves. I'm riding the waves of music and he's riding the waves of the ocean.
Sound waves, yeah. Frequency, and I would argue like frequency.
Yeah.
Riding this frequency wave, what we're describing for people, if someone's listening, I know that it's resonating with some people, and some people are going to go, it's a little bit woo-woo-y, but that's not the right word. My hallucination is that some people are not sure. They go, but I'm worried about cash. I'm worried about cash flow. And those are realities, right? That's the blood flow of your business. My thought is we need to help them feel brave and confident in this direction, because at the first sign of it not working, this isn't for the emboldened. I honestly think that, because what happens, people go to their safe place, it's maybe not working right away. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's not working. It's like a seed needs time to grow. Things need to happen. What I hope for people is that they can see that by being patient, it's not passive. It's like being really intentional with your time. And sometimes that means if you're going to go and apply these, you can't apply short-term thinking. Otherwise, it will stifle you. It'll frustrate you, in my mind. You'll only get lucky if it's working, in my mind.
There's an event that happens in the human neurology. When you know how long it's going to take, you're willing, oftentimes, most of the time perhaps, you're willing to wait that long. And what we have to be able to get people to get in touch with is, how long will it take? If you can approach that question without the need for an immediate answer, then that answer is going to come to you eventually. And there's that old cliche, how long will it take? It'll take as long as it takes. That's not what we're saying here. What we're saying is exactly, I'm just riffing off of what you mentioned a moment ago, a seed. And I think about the surf exercise enterprise that you were putting together, and the partner bailed on it because it wasn't paying dividends as fast. And that's like plowing under a field that's been planted because the sprouts have not yet come to the surface. Well, read the package, right? Because when you're planting seeds, there's been enough experience in the past that they know that you plant the seed 4 inches deep, and you do this much watering, and you do whatever you do. You've prepped the soil and all of that. And on the package it says, will take 3.5 weeks before the seedling breaks the surface. And you have to be able to translate that into what's happening in your enterprise. Whatever it is that you have done, whatever seeds that you have planted, are going to take a certain amount of time in order for them to become, in order for any kind of a result to become visible. We have to be able to encourage, which is the top 1/3 of the heart muscle. Courage literally means heart in French. Time of the heart. We have to encourage people to be vigilant on the patience of knowing that if they are consistent and persistent, that they will get the result regardless of the things that come in their way. They will get the result that they are looking for, but it will take some time. And being willing to go through that amount of time, whatever it actually is, and then document it so that eventually there would be a package saying 3.5 weeks you'll see a result.
I saw this quote I want to share with you. It was given to me, the author of this book sent me this book. He listened to me in a clubhouse, and I was talking about my second principle, give is the new get. And so they sent me this. So the quote, he says, the law of compensation, it's totally related to this. Your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. And I think that is so appropriate, because part of that knowing is really being honest with yourself of, what are you really giving? Are you so focused on what am I receiving, or are you focused on what am I giving? And when you shift your mindset there of a mindful marketer, and you know that it's going to come back to you, the law of reciprocity is going to be there for you.
So there's a part of the body called the heart center. And the heart center is made up of 3 major components. One is the thymus gland, which is an endocrine gland. It's the pace setter of the heart. The other, the 2 lungs, and the third is the heart itself. What cardiologists are beginning to understand is that there is a lot of neurology, a lot of brain substance in the heart. Gastrointestinal doctors are understanding that there's a lot of brain substance in the gut, and there's a book called M-braining, or multi-braining, meaning the gut brain, the heart brain, and the head brain. We've developed the head brain, but the heart brain and the gut brain are the ones that we now need to develop in order for us to create balance in this world, in order for us to create relationships in this world that are more meaningful than analytical, because the head brain's a 2-dimensional analyzer. So I'm going to talk about, just for a moment, about the heart brain. The heart brain is governed by the principles of the lungs and the heart. And the principles of the lung and the heart is that it takes great effort to give and total surrender to receive. The heart pumps the blood into the body and then has to go completely limp in order to receive the blood back that's been used. The same thing is true for respiration as well as circulation. In respiration, the little sacs inside your lungs are called alveoli sacs. And they are naturally like little cartilage springs. They are naturally open. And that openness is your inhale. So you have to relax your lungs and they will naturally inhale. Otherwise, when you fall asleep, your lungs would collapse and you would suffocate. To exhale requires an additional effort. This is the quality of the new economy. This is the quality of the new, not zero-sum banking system or economic system, but a more heart-centered economic system. And that is exactly what you said. If you want have income, you have to focus on your outflow. Who are you serving? And what's the quality of what it is that you're serving to them? You focus on that, and it's the story behind every phenomenon of success. It's the story behind every groundswell of success. They were more in love with what they were doing and who they were doing it for than they were in love with what am I receiving. Because the moment you go to what am I getting out of this, you engage the sympathetic nervous system, which creates tension in the body. And that tension in the body, now you're going to be short of breath and you're going to have high blood pressure. I'm a sign languager, and when somebody says that sounds too woo-woo, I just go, this is what I have to say about that. It is not woo-woo, it is cosmic law. And it's not only just cosmic law, it's anatomical law, it's biological law, it's medical law. That if you focus on the quality of your service and the recipient of that which you are serving, you are going to receive back more than you could possibly imagine.
I was talking to my son about, he's really frustrated looking for jobs. And I said, Davis, it's like dating. I didn't think my dating was working until I met my wife, Jill. It works until it doesn't. So you think of every story of musicians that are, or stars that have been found, they just love their craft. They were just doing it. And then suddenly they weren't anymore. And then if you think of any time in life when you were thinking it was never going to end, the work that you were doing, and somehow it just wasn't going to work out, and then it did, that feeling, all those times you were worried about it just went away. And you almost forget about it. And I think that's a lesson. Think of someone dating or looking for a job and being so frustrated. I really want them to deploy that thinking with this, because it's working. You just can't see it. It's the unseen wave of growth. That's what I call it. And I believe what we're talking about is there's ways that you can actually identify, and you can have knowing that it's working. It's not that it's not working. It's like being more present to some of the indications, or having trust in the outcome, because you already know that you're serving and you're building and you're doing something. So
you just said something that it's like 4 feet away from me, and I'm going to grab it because I'm a graphic artist and I love to. And you are too.
And by the way, when we're doing this, we were talking that we're going to have the whiteboard and we're going to probably share some screens. So this is like the module 1 of just getting to know what we're talking about.
So
wait, here we go.
This is a PowerPoint presentation. It's a slide, and I'm going to point at it. So right here, let's see if we can get it so that the light doesn't shine off.
Yeah, it looks perfect.
So what we perceive in the iceberg, right? What we perceive is 1/7 of reality. And what we perceive in life is even less than that. But in the gross physical example of an iceberg, the vast invisible reality. And it's that vast invisible reality that most people refuse to believe. And when you start describing it, they start saying, that's too woo-woo. I need something that I can feel, touch, smell and taste. No, that's where faith comes in. And faith is not something that is religious. I mean, obviously religion co-opted the term. But faith simply means that you are knowing the outcome before it's come out. And then you just know you have to wait. And that waiting is what's called patience. And that attitude is what's called knowing that you know. And in the story that you're about to tell, you were the one that knew the outcome. The one that doubted the outcome decided not to continue. So go ahead.
When you're showing the iceberg, this is how sometimes maybe this whole experience is going to be, is we're going to unexpectedly take a couple turns. I want to share a screen with you, if I may, before I tell you the story, because this kind of gives
if you may, we got no rules.
I have this graph that I'm going to show you. It's this, and this is basically how brand identity versus brand strategy. So this, to me, in mindful marketing is up top. So this is how I explain brand. Most people think of a brand of a business as the logo, the identity, the name, the typeface. But a real brand strategy is what's underneath what you can't see. The purpose, your mission, your vision. These are unseen things that you build that then support that, so that when you present it, it's congruent and it's there. What you're talking about is, and what we're talking about mindful marketing is, there's this other even bigger piece underneath, even over top of this, that I think is even deeper in the iceberg or further down. That's about what is really this epic, like the personal brand, what they're really about. It's kind of purpose, but I think it's even more meaningful and maybe more broad. And that's what we're going to touch on, is what's below the unseen. What's the purpose of building this enterprise, this business, this brand, this marketing and stuff.
Well, what's below the unseen is the source code.
Yes.
And that's where everything is in the continuum, to quote the entanglement language of quantum physics. And with that introduction, I would love you to travel down the road of your surfing, whatever you called it. Go ahead, tell us that story.
So what I'm going to show you is basically the company that I'm talking about, that I'm about to share this backstory. This wasn't just like the branding, the marketing and stuff.
Yeah, what Scott's going to show you is how incredibly phenomenal this could have been.
Okay, here we go.
Fantastic.
So to give people background, the idea of the company was called Swellness, and it was with a partner named Mallory, who she's lovely, by the way, and a fellow surfer. And we wanted to create this vision of being surfer strong, that surfers have this body build, and we wanted to embody that sort of surfer lifestyle in it. So we shot on 4 or 5 locations around the world, and we ended up shooting. The idea was that we would have, for somebody who never wanted to be bored, we had enough workouts that was an original workout for 6 months, that you never did the same workout. And then you could do groupings, but you could do similar ones that you liked. We created a community. We had an app. We had an active user base. We had a sizable 5K plus in Instagram and following. So we had all the right things. Like, you have me as the marketer. So I was doing a lot of the buildup, but I know how long it takes to do this organically without doing paid. So we had built up, we had been doing this for a year. It wasn't quite reaching that threshold of income that she was hoping that was coming in, but we'd already done all the work. I already edited all the 300 videos. We already had the platform. We already had the app. We already had the communities built. It was just that was just the build phase. A lot of people in marketing think, well, I've already done all the website. I've already done this, and the build phase is done because I've now put it out to the world. Well, why are people not buying? The build phase isn't done. Build phase is an iterative process over a period of time till you galvanize, you found your way, you've kind of planted seeds, there's enough momentum going, and you need to view that as part of your build phase. That's the mindset. And so in this case with my business partner, it wasn't making the income that she wanted to make. So she's like, you know what, this isn't working for me. I want to pack it up. And I could have easily kept it going, but I wasn't the one doing the workouts. I didn't feel authentic for me to continue it. I could have easily just put it up and just made it into an automated business. But what happened was we shut that down. And it was I think we actually closed down the business in October of 2019. So had we waited a mere 6 months later, Does anybody doubt that that would have been a like we were ahead of the curve? Nobody was really doing a lot of these workouts on demand, creating community in real time app. And because it was hard to get people really going, well, I can go to the gym. That was our competitor, was people just wanted to go to the gym.
And now you've got Peloton and everything else.
This was pre-Peloton. This was before that. And this would have been, in my mind, a global brand. And so I want to share that story for no other reason to then tell other people, to share with other people about the perseverance. And you don't know if you know you have something, to play it through, and not telling people that if something's broken, to not walk away from it. You have to be very honest with yourself. But if you're serving and you feel that it's like the product is there, your need is there, and you love it. And see, if I would have loved doing those and been in front of the camera and I love that, I would have carried it on. But I clearly, it wasn't congruent with me. I'm not a yoga instructor. And if I had that congruency, I would have done it. That story would have been very different. But because I was a partner and her side was that piece, then that's why that fell away. But it's a lesson I didn't want to lose. And so I created a chapter called basically Patience is the New Growth Hack. And most people are looking for these hacks, the shortcuts. Patience is the ultimate hack.
You know, you're talking a new word. Remember earlier we were saying you have to create a new language. The word swellness. It's combining, obviously, the swell of the ocean and the swell of growth and the swell of everything, and wellness. And this is exactly what we're talking about as far as new languaging. It's not like picking things out of the sky and just making up from Scrabble words, right? From pieces of letters that are lying around the table. We're talking about putting things together that make sense inside of everybody's mind. Because when you say swellness, just like when you said epicenter, these are the kinds of things that are going to cause people's brains to, use your frame, hack. They're going to hack into the conversation. They're going to start going off in tangents. And that's what we want people to do. And marketing, we want people to go off in tangents and explore areas that they had never thought of, not just brainstorming, but actually brain mining, where they find a vein of real gold and they just follow it to wherever it's going to go, wherever it's going to lead them.
Oh my goodness, you're totally correct. I have this word exercise that maybe later on when we get down to messaging and I am going to show an exercise called the word exercise, which is finding this one piece of gold and going down. And you do it all the time with me in words. You go, the root word of this is this.
Yeah.
And I kind of did it, but not to the level you've done it. But that's how I get to these words, is I find these patterns and start piecing it together. But it's actually, it sounds like it's a bit of like you had to be a creative genius to do it. I will share my kimono in this situation when we get to it to show you that it's actually more logic than you realize if you just follow through. It's a little bit more like
that's going to be vitally important. So make a note. You got to write that down, because that is a comment in passing that needs to be engraved, because that is what we have to do for many reasons, is to create a new language, a new vocabulary, not a new language, but a new vocabulary within all languages, so that we can actually end up allowing people to explore the parts of their brain. Because just like you type in a password, if it's the wrong password, it doesn't let you in. The brain is the same way. If we start typing in new words in our thought frame, all of a sudden it lets us into parts of our brain connection to the universal mind that is not something that we're accustomed to. And we have new ideas, new thoughts, new innovative, and we start to, that's when we have to do what you were talking about a moment ago. Have the courage to be persistent and insistent, so that you follow through and you follow through and you follow through on a new idea that has never been proven, but you have an inkling, you have this gut sense, right? Which is the gut brain, which is the clairsentience. This is the clairsentience, clairaudience, clairvoyance, right? The heart moves up in through the auditory channels. That's what happens. You're listening to your heartbeat. You're listening to the rhythms of life. And so what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to create these new words that open up these neurological centers, so that all of a sudden people are going to start looking at their products and their lives and their passions and their entrepreneurial inclinations in a whole new light, in a whole new way. And they're going to rejoin the passion. I mean, when you talk about that business, Swellness, that business is like 2 seconds away from global success. And you know it and I know it. And it would just take, somebody to pick that up and say, okay, let's be the third Peloton. Because there's already
still on the brand.
There's Mirror and there's Peloton and then there's Swellness.
Could still run with it right now.
Yeah, I'm your yogi.
There we go. So maybe we're in real time, we're seeing that maybe this is a possibility.
So we're showing you folks in real time what new languaging can inspire between two people that already know each other quite well, but it has a new angle on the relationship. So maybe, just maybe, we've struck some gold here. And by the way, you were talking about, I was thinking seed and you said planting seeds just a few moments later. So I see the synchronicity and the resonance in what we're dealing with here. But the bottom line with seeds is that if you don't let them germinate, sprout and root, travel to the surface, break the surface, survive the nibbling stage, which is when a pine tree is a sprout, it's nibble food for the smallest mouse, right? And it's got all of these stages through which it has to grow and survive. And then eventually it's like, a pine tree on one of our properties is like a 300-year-old pine. And it's like just majestic and magnificent, standing next to a 225-year-old spruce that's just magnificent and majestic. But both of those had to have the courage to germinate, because once you break the shell of your idea, of your concept, once you break the shell and start exposing it to the elements of the earth and the water and whatever else is going to germinate that seed, once that shell is broken, you can't put it back in the shell. And that's what holds people back to some degree, is that they're afraid to break the shell, so they hold it as an idea.
Okay, so on that, you're totally reading my mind right now. I was going to say before, when you were talking about the idea of gut, right? Not the idea, the concept of gut intelligence. How many people, they had a seed of an idea, but they didn't act on it. And they would go and they go, that was my idea. I had that exact same idea. And
it's called a hunch. It's called a gut sense, a gut reaction. Yes, you're absolutely correct.
So that right there, and then people dismiss it. And I would view that as being, you should use that as evidence that you should trust your gut. And had you done that, you could have probably, the only thing that didn't happen was all the things that we're talking about, it requires action. Massive, like Tony Robbins says, taking massive action. Far too many people feel that they are willing or hoping it to happen. Without action, none of this stuff works. And so to me, the gut, that's a sign that you didn't take action on your gut.
Yeah. You just said two words that I want to bring to people's attention. You just said willing and hoping. The heart is made up of 3 levels. The entry level is at the bottom of the heart, and it comes off of the inspiration, which means to breathe in, inspiration of the diaphragm. And the lungs are the belief agent, the diaphragm is the inspiration agent. And the heart is the hope, will, and courage. Hope opens up the possibility. Willingness enters the possibility with activity. And then because for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, in other words, there's pushback, you have to have the courage to face the pushback and maintain your effort. And these are the syncopations of the body, the emotional body, and the mental body. The syncopation and the synchronization of it all working together. And that's one of the things that we want to inspire, so that the people believe. They say that what you breathe in, you believe in. And that then hugs the heart, which produces hope, which opens up the idea, possibilities of the idea. Willingness, which then takes action. You have to have will to take action. And then knowing the moment you take action, there's going to be a reaction. There's going to be an objection. And then not being destroyed by the objection, but being actually emboldened by the objection, because that equal and opposite creates that tension. You sail, I'm sure you sail, you surf and you sail.
I used to windsurf, actually.
Yeah, and the best windsurfing is tacking against the wind, because you actually get a lot more lift in your board, because you're not being driven, you're not being nosed in, right? You're being actually lifted, and the moment you get your nose up, then you start really planing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is all the dynamics that are both anatomical and biological, but they're also business dynamics as they are cosmic dynamics. So it's the same at every level. This is what we teach. This is how we reach people to suddenly go, I can do that. I can do that. Inspired.
I love it. It's beautiful. We are going to inspire. We're ushering in, I think, a new era of the way that marketing can be done. And
hopefully is a good choice of words there, because it just simply means full of hope.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with full of hope. Hopefully is another one of the words that's been degraded over time. But hopefully is a good expression. And then you go from hopefully to willfully. And then you go from willfully to courageously, and now you've engaged the entire heart muscle.
So this is what I would invite and offer to people listening. This is my true belief. What you and I are talking about is not, hey, this is something you should do because of ethics and morals, which is great. I think those are there for sure. I actually am saying this is strategically smart. I actually think this is the new, you're ahead of the curve. I actually think that this is where it's going, because ask anybody that's listening, ask in your heart, is it working? It's not. Are you ignoring things more? When you see an ad, is it eye pollution? Do you love driving through the mountains and seeing billboards? Is that something you enjoy? Or do you like having commercials? No. People are paying money to not see commercials. Netflix is you paying money not to see commercials. That's what it is. If you really think about it, what we're shifting is we're shifting out of this where we're no longer wanting this, and we're realizing sometimes you get stuff that it doesn't even matter to you. It's not even relevant. And
people are making money off of the disturbance of commercials. They say to you, you get all these pop-ups and pop-ups and pop-ups, and then there's this banner that says, if you want to visit this site ad-free, it's a subscription. So people are making money off of what you're talking about. That's so beautiful what you just said.
What I'm seeing is the ineffectiveness of what's going on, speaking louder, saying more, doing more. Aren't people exhausted at the way that attention and marketing is done in business? Is it's this framework that we've been bought into of you need to do these things in order to run your business. And I'm saying, and what we're saying is there's actually a better way, a more congruent way, a more fun way, a more exciting way, a more inspired way that actually is better in an outcome, but you have to have the courage.
Yeah.
You have to have the belief.
Wow. You just described the heart center, belief and courage, because the lungs and heart. And that holds true to what we were discussing earlier. What was the phrase that you're using in your book? Give is the new get.
Oh, give is the new get, yeah.
Hey, and by the way, just to take that analysis just 1 inch further, because getting is an effort and giving is an effort, but receiving is no effort at all. And what people are actually looking for is receiving, because you don't know you have anything until you actually receive it. And that's the foundation, that's the core cause of greed, is that people are striving to get rather than striving to give. And when you strive to get, you may get mountains of resource, mountains of capital, mountains. but you're never satisfied because you've not received. Receiving is a psychosomatic and emotional component, mental, physical, and emotional component, that you can feel it in your body. You emote it in your sensations, and you know it in your mind. And when you lock onto, that's when everything you do is high value, high quality, valued delivery. And that is massive return on the investment of your give.
You can't get the R in ROI unless you do the I, which is invest. So you want the return, which is what we're talking about receiving. You need to make the investment. That is what giving is. And I would also offer that if somebody wants to hijack this, going, okay, we're just going to give and it's only to get, they're missing the point. It's the intention of give. It's the knowingness that it comes back, but not necessarily it's a parlor trick. It's not. If you have the energy of going, I'm going to say these things just to close you in business, we as humans can feel it. Like we can go, you're just trying to sell me. You're just trying to close me. It's like a feeling. So if you go with the intention, and that's where I think that part of mindful marketing in my mind, if you can go into this idea of mindful marketing with the intention, like the thought lead to the mind going, I want to serve and take care of these people, instead of going, what do I need to give so I can get? Those are two thoughts that are not the same. And that's what I want to make sure people understand is it's very different. And that is the thought process that I believe that becomes mindful. If you have that heart-centered thought process of from the intention, the source of what you want to do is like from there, that's where I think is unbelievable prosperity, abundance is on your way. But when you go the other way, you're trying to hack it, you're trying to treat this as a parlor trick, I think you're missing it.
Perfect. Perfect.